Around the early 16th century, blank were imported to the New World. The Indian workforce did not quite meet the colonists' wishes. All right, so we're talking about African slaves here. All right, so now we're going to introduce African slavery. All right, so around the early 16th century, African slaves were imported to the New World. The Indian workforce did not quite meet the colonists' wishes. Now, the the Africans, very similar to the Indians, they were seen as savages and uncivilized, but that honestly was not the case. All right, so you had a lot of African individuals who were educated and civilized, and even back in Africa, they had tribes that had strong political structure, but for some reason, the ones specifically here, like African slaves, were captured slaves from tribal wars. Okay, so let's say you have two tribes in Africa. They're in war. They capture one. Okay, they capture an enemy's military men. They would capture him, sell him off to the Europeans, and then from the Europeans, they'll go ahead and ship him off from one of the slave ports into the New World, where they began to replace the Indian workforce because the Indian workforce was not meeting the colonists' satisfactions. So around the early 16th century, African slaves were imported to the New World. The Indian workforce did not quite meet the colonists' wishes. Once again, Indians, Africans, they were all seen as savages from the European perspective, but that is truly not the case because both Pueblo Indians and other local natives had strong uh, language, can effectively communicate with each other, had great knowledge of agricultural areas. African slaves held great political structure back home in Africa, but when they were captured by the Spanish Empire, the Pueblo Indians were seen as savages. And then when tribal wars in Africa broke out, they would use those POWs, prisoners of war, and they'll go ahead and they'll sell them off to European merchants, slave merchants that'll ship them off to the New World and sell them or resell them as slaves. Okay, and then this was the ultimate backbone of the economy, of the labor system of the early 16th century within Central America. We're discussing specifically the New Mexico region, Santa Fe. All right.